Welcome to DrowsyTeller. If you're new here, settle in. You've just stepped into a space where questions matter more than answers, and the veil between what is and what could be grows thinner with every word. We explore the stories the mainstream avoids, the patterns that don't fit, and the truths buried beneath layers of silence. Here, the strange is expected, and the unexplained is only the beginning. Tonight, our path leads us to the heart of European science, CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research. But this isn't a tale of breakthrough discoveries or Nobel Prizes. No, this is what happens when the quest for knowledge goes too far. When machines built to understand the universe begin to tamper with its very fabric. When doors are opened and something answers from the other side. What you're about to hear is framed as fiction. But I want you to keep one question in mind as you listen. What if it's not? Beneath the peaceful hills of Switzerland, something may already be awake. Close your eyes and listen closely. The disappearance of Dr. Lydia Voss. This account was allegedly recovered from a water-damaged journal found on the banks of Lake Geneva in early 2018. The journal belonged to Dr. Lydia Voss, a theoretical physicist who vanished without a trace in November 2017. Her disappearance briefly made local headlines for exactly 3 days before being quietly dropped. The journal's entries became increasingly erratic, filled with indecipherable physics equations and symbols predating written language. This is her account, what she claimed to have uncovered beneath CERN, and the reason she may have disappeared. September 15, 2016. My name is Dr. Lydia Voss, and I need to document this while I still can, while I still remember what it feels like to be sane. I've been a physicist for over a dozen years, earned my doctorate from Cambridge, focused on quantum mechanics and multiverse theory. I thought I understood the universe, or at least I understood just how little we truly comprehend. That humility, I believed, was my strength. Instead, it became the very doorway through which something unspeakable entered my life. I was recruited to CERN in early 2016. Initially assigned to the ALICE experiment within the Large Hadron Collider. It was standard work, analyzing collision data, searching for exotic particles, the kind of research every graduate student dreams about, the chance to peer into the building blocks of reality itself. The LHC had just come online after a major upgrade, and we were achieving energy levels higher than ever before. The Higgs boson discovery in 2012 had cracked open new frontiers, but by 2016, the results we were seeing defied the known laws of physics. Particles that should not exist, energy readings that ignored conservation principles, and data patterns that seemed intentional. That's when I was transferred to Project Janus. The reassignment came without warning. I showed up at my workstation one morning to find Dr. Heinrich Volkar waiting for me, flanked by 2 unfamiliar security officers. Volkar was a CERN veteran, a presence dating back to the 1980s, a man who'd witnessed the shaping of modern particle physics. His reputation commanded respect, but there was something in his eyes that day, something I can now only describe as fear. "Dr. Voss," he said, his thick German accent clipped with urgency. "You've been selected for a special assignment. Your work in multiverse theory has drawn our attention." I remember feeling honored. Project Janus was rumored to be CERN's most secretive division, working on theories that pushed even the wildest edges of quantum physics. To be chosen for it should have been the pinnacle of my career. Instead, it marked the beginning of something much darker. The Janus facility was in a section marked Subsector Gamma, a place unlisted on any official schematic. Access required passing through multiple layers of security, followed by an elevator descent that lasted nearly 8 minutes, far deeper than any part of the main collider ring. As we descended, the walls shifted, from sterile steel to something else entirely. The surfaces took on an organic appearance, covered in geometric carvings that felt ancient. "How deep are we going?" I asked. "Deep enough," Volker replied. The Janus lab bore no resemblance to any research facility I'd ever seen. Instead of clinical lighting and white walls, it was dim, illuminated by a red ambient glow that pulsed faintly from within the walls. Around the edges, quantum computers buzzed, running simulations so complex I couldn't even estimate their processing power. But it was the central display that stopped me cold. A three-dimensional holographic projection that showed what appeared to be a cross-section of space-time, layered like transparent sheets. Running through all of it was a luminous line of energy, like a thread pulled through fabric. "What am I looking at?" I whispered. Volker stepped forward, the glow lighting up his features. "The Higgs field, Dr. Voss, but not as we know it. Since we began the high-energy collisions, we've discovered the field isn't uniform, it has structure." He zoomed in on a section where the field seemed to ripple and bend around invisible objects. "At first, we thought these were simulation errors, but they repeat, they're consistent, and they respond." "Respond?" I asked. "Watch." He initiated a field perturbation, a simulated high-energy collision. As virtual particles collided, the Higgs field didn't just behave as predicted. Instead, it produced crystalline geometries, patterns that formed something like circuitry. I inhaled sharply. "Those neutrino deviations, they're not random." "Exactly," Volker said. "And the question is, what's influencing them?" That night, I sat in my small apartment in Mayrin, unable to sleep. The coffee in my mug went cold as I sketched the structures I'd seen. The Higgs field, which we believed only gave particles mass, now appeared to be a framework, possibly a medium for other forces, perhaps even other forms of intelligence. I began digging into CERN's history. Myths, rumors, fringe theories. Most were absurd, but within the noise, some patterns emerged. CERN was built atop an ancient Roman temple dedicated to Apollo. Local legends spoke of it as a gate to the underworld. The organization's logo contained 3 sixes, an official coincidence but disquieting nonetheless. And then there was the statue, Shiva, the Hindu god of destruction, dancing outside the collider. But it was an obscure video from 2016 that unsettled me most. It showed what looked like a ritual near the Shiva statue. Hooded figures circled in silence, some recording. The footage was shaky, distant, but it felt wrong. The next morning, I brought it up to Dr. Volker. He chuckled. "We like to keep the conspiracy theorists entertained. Even scientists need to have fun, Dr. Voss." But I'd watched the video frame by frame. I was sure he was there. And so was Dr. Sarah Chen, who had first welcomed me to Janus. When I mentioned it, Volker's expression shifted, from playful to glacial. "Dr. Voss," he said slowly, "perhaps you've been spending too much time on those websites. Distractions like that aren't healthy." But in his eyes I saw it. He remembered. He knew that I knew. Later that day, I was assigned to work with Dr. Matteo Greaves, a prodigy in quantum field theory. He couldn't have been more than 28, driven and brilliant. He'd already uncovered data patterns no one could explain. "Our equations are flawed," he told me, "or rather, the constants we rely on. They're approximations. The deeper you go, the less they hold." He showed me interactions in the simulations. Higgs field responses that resembled neural networks or circuit diagrams. It's as if the universe has an underlying design, something hidden, And every time we smash particles together, we're revealing it. What kind of design? I asked. That's the question, isn't it? But Lydia, I think we need to ask ourselves, what if consciousness isn't just an emergent property? What if it's fundamental? The implications were staggering. If consciousness was woven into space-time itself, then every high-energy collision wasn't just revealing new matter, it was possibly establishing contact. Contact with what? We still didn't know. But something was responding, and it had been waiting. I said, what if we're not just observing these patterns? What if we're actually communicating with them? He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. That's exactly what I've been wondering, he replied. And Lydia, I think they're trying to communicate back. October 3rd, 2016. I've been trying to track down that video again, the one showing the ritual near the Shiva statue. It's been scrubbed from every platform where I initially found it. Fortunately, I saved a local copy before it vanished. Watching it frame by frame reveals details that make my skin crawl. The ritual occurred on the night of August 14th, 2016, at precisely 11:47 p.m. I know this because I cross-referenced the timestamp with CERN's operation logs. That same night, the LHC underwent an unscheduled technical maintenance shutdown. The collision data recorded a massive energy surge at 11:43 p.m., immediately followed by a complete system failure that lasted 3 hours and 4 minutes. Exactly 4 minutes passed between the spike and the beginning of the ritual. In the video, the figures form what appears to be a summoning circle around the Shiva statue. There are 13 participants, all dressed in identical dark robes. 2 of them pull back their hoods. Dr. Volker is unmistakably one of them, and the other is clearly Dr. Chen. A third figure, who I believe is Dr. Marcus Webb from the Theoretical Physics Department, is holding what looks like a leather-bound book, but it's the fourth figure that unsettles me most. They never remove their hood, and their movements are unnatural. They move with an unnerving, almost serpentine grace, like their body isn't bound by typical human structure. When they raise their arms, the motion is perfectly synchronized with the others. But the posture suggests something inhuman. The audio track is mostly wind and static, but after running it through enhancement software, I isolated fragments of sound. It might be chanting. No language I recognize, but it follows rhythmic patterns eerily similar to the quantum interference signatures we've been seeing in the Janus data. I've been re-watching the video obsessively, and I'm noticing details that shouldn't be possible. The shadows cast by the participants don't match the lighting in the scene. The Shiva statue itself seems to shift ever so slightly, as though it were breathing. In the distant background, barely visible near the bottom edge of the frame, there are faint lights beneath the ground. Red lights, pulsing in time with the chanting, the same red glow that illuminates the Janus facility. I showed the video to Matteo yesterday during lunch. As the ceremony played out, he went pale. "Jesus Christ, Lydia," he whispered. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" I asked. "The real question is, what are they doing?" He stared at the screen for a long while, studying the formation of figures. "They're trying to establish a link," he finally said. "Look at how they're positioned. 13 points, perfectly spaced. That's not arbitrary. It's a geometric formation designed to create resonance." "Resonance with what?" I asked. "With whatever is responding to our experiments. Lydia, I've been running models on the quantum field fluctuations. These patterns, they're not just intelligent, they're pushing through from somewhere else, and I think that ritual was meant to help them do it." That night, I stayed late in the Janus facility, not to analyze data, as I claimed, but to find hard evidence linking the ritual to our research. The building was nearly deserted. Only a skeleton crew watching over the automated systems. The red ambient lighting felt more intense than usual, casting shadows that seemed to drift independently of their sources. I accessed the historical archives, digging for anomalies that coincided with the ritual's timeline. What I found chilled me. The energy spike on August 14th wasn't an accident. It was a controlled event, executed with precision. The collision energy had been focused on a particular sector of the LHC, directly beneath the Shiva statue. More disturbing were the minutes following the ritual. Quantum field monitors across the facility recorded what the system labeled as exotic matter signatures, particles that existed only for nanoseconds, yet left behind lingering imprints in the field. And those imprints, they mirrored the interference patterns we'd been analyzing in Janus. I was so absorbed that I didn't notice the lights dimming until it was too late. The red glow was fading, replaced by a deeper illumination that seemed to leak from the walls themselves. In that light, I saw them. Figures, standing motionless in the shadows at the edge of the room. Alive, somehow, but not moving. They wore robes identical to those in the video, but their hoods didn't just hide their faces. They seemed to consume light as if made from absence itself. I tried to move, to speak, but I couldn't. Terror pinned me down like a weight on my chest. One of the figures stepped forward. Beneath its hood, there was no face. Not darkness. Absence. Like reality itself had been carved away. It spoke, not aloud, but inside my mind. The threshold weakens. The pattern becomes clear. Soon, the collision. I must have blacked out. When I came to, I was slumped at my desk, sunlight streaming through the windows. The facility had returned to normal. White lights overhead, computers humming, colleagues arriving and chatting about mundane things. But there was something on my computer screen. A message that hadn't been there before. The Shiva statue stands directly above subsector Theta. Ask yourself why. I spent the rest of the day researching the facility's construction history, searching for any mention of subsector Theta. The official blueprints showed nothing, but deep within archived reports from the 1980s, I found fragments. Notes about excavation difficulties and the discovery of unexpected subterranean structures. One report described a cave system found approximately 1.44 kilometers beneath the surface, directly below where the Shiva statue stands today. The caves were sealed with reinforced concrete and steel. The report also mentioned strange electromagnetic activity and constant low-frequency vibrations that made construction workers feel uneasy. The work was completed ahead of schedule, and the caves were never mentioned again. That evening, I met Matteo at a quiet cafe in Geneva, away from CERN's surveillance. I showed him the screen capture and the engineering notes. "Lydia," he said, his voice hushed, "I think we need to entertain a terrifying idea. CERN might not have been built to study particle physics. What if it was built to access something that was already here?" "What do you mean?" "Think about the location, the depth, the design of the collider ring. None of it adds up from a purely scientific standpoint. There are dozens of more suitable locations on Earth. But this site, this exact spot, was chosen for reasons far outside conventional physics." He pulled out a notebook filled with calculations and diagrams. "I've been working on this for weeks. The collision energies, the quantum field reactions, they're not random. They follow patterns, but not our physics. It's as though we're communicating with an intelligence that obeys different physical laws." "And you think that intelligence is inside the cave system?" I asked. "I think the cave is a focal point, a thinning between realities, and I think the LHC is being used to erode the barrier further." As we spoke, I noticed other cafe patrons glancing at us, not directly, but from the edges of their vision. A woman reading a newspaper hadn't flipped a page in over 20 minutes. A man typing on a laptop was repeating the same line over and over. Matteo noticed too. "We need to be more careful," he warned. "I think we're being watched." "By whom?" I asked. "By whoever's running this. The ones in that video. They're not just some rogue staff pulling pranks. They're part of something coordinated, and they have access to resources and knowledge far beyond any normal research team." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the hooded figure. I had seen it in the facility. That face of absence, that place where a face should have been. And now, in my dreams, I stood within a vast underground chamber, its walls etched with symbols that shifted and changed the moment I looked away. At the center of the room was a pool of liquid. Not water, but something darker, that reflected not my face, but the face of something entirely alien. When I awoke, I realized my hand had been moving in my sleep. I had drawn unfamiliar symbols in my notepad, symbols I couldn't consciously recall but instinctively understood. They matched the ones from my dream, and as I stared at them, they seemed to pulse, almost alive. I was becoming part of something I didn't understand, something that was using my intellect and knowledge for goals I couldn't yet grasp. I was beginning to wonder if my recruitment to Project Janus hadn't been about talent at all, but something closer to a summoning. October 18th, 2016. Matteo is missing. The last time I saw him was 3 days ago, on October 15th, when we were preparing for a deep field analysis of the quantum interference patterns. He had been animated that morning, energized in that manic way that comes from too little rest and far too much caffeine. "I think I've cracked it," he told me. "I figured out how to translate the interference signatures into mathematical structures we can actually interpret. It's not noise, it's information. Structured. It has grammar, Lydia." He had been training a translation AI, feeding it quantum waveforms, and asking it to cross-reference them against known linguistic systems. Most results were nonsense, but one pattern caught his attention. The AI had returned a 73% phonetic match with ancient Sumerian, specifically the dialect associated with descriptions of the Abzu, the primordial sea beneath the earth, ruled by Enki, and described as a gateway to the underworld. "Abzu," he repeated, showing me the output. "The deep waters, the source of knowledge and fear." Lydia, what if the myths weren't myths at all? What if they were just the best possible explanations ancient minds could construct for phenomena they couldn't yet understand? I had been skeptical, but the mathematical consistency in the results couldn't be ignored. These quantum interference patterns weren't random. They were forming words, ideas, echoes of meaning with direct parallels in humanity's most ancient records. "The collision energies we're using," Matteo continued, "they're not just breaking particles apart, they're creating communication channels. This thing, it's been trying to talk to us for thousands of years, and I think it's finally succeeding." That was the last coherent conversation I had with him. Later that day, he volunteered for overnight monitoring of the collider's automated sequences, a routine task. I offered to stay and help, but he waved me off. "I've got this," he said. The next morning, his station was empty. His coffee was still warm. His notebook sat open, its pages filled with erratic calculations. But Matteo was gone. Security footage showed him taking the elevator down at 2:47 a.m. to subsector Theta, the same sector that, according to all official records, doesn't exist. Yet his keycard continued logging activity for hours afterward, still running experiments, still accessing sensitive files. The last digital footprint came at 6:23 a.m., when his credentials were used to access deep archive data, files related to CERN's earliest geological surveys. Since then, any inquiry I've made about him receives the same response. Dr. Matteo Greaves has been reassigned to a classified project and is not available for consultation. When I pressed Dr. Volkar, his response was chilling. Not just evasive, but frightened. "Dr. Voss," he said, voice low and steady, "I recommend you focus on your assignments. Speculating about your colleagues is unwise. The work we're doing here is more important than any one individual." But I know Matteo didn't simply transfer. The way the Janus staff looks at me now, with cautious pity and veiled dread, they know what happened. And I suspect they're waiting to see if I'll follow the same path. I've spent every night since in the facility's restricted library, diving deeper into the mythological framework Matteo had unearthed. The ancient Sumerians described the Abzu as a realm where the rules of the physical world no longer applied, where consciousness floated freely and vast intelligences slept, dreaming of influence. Disturbingly, their accounts align perfectly with our experimental data. The Sumerians believed in words of power, symbols and frequencies that could rewrite the physical world. They spoke of geometric doorways between dimensions and rituals designed to open those doorways. The overlaps with what we've seen in Janus are far too precise to dismiss as coincidence. Last night, I did something reckless. I used Matteo's keycard, still inexplicably active, to access subsector Theta. The elevator ride was far longer than any descent I'd taken before. We dropped for what felt like an eternity, past layers of rock and metal, past levels unmarked on any schematic I've ever seen. As we descended, the construction materials changed. Steel and concrete gave way to ancient stone, worn smooth by time. This was not modern architecture. This was something else, something older. When the elevator finally stopped, I stepped out into a corridor that stretched endlessly in both directions. The walls were inscribed with the same shifting glyphs I had seen in my dreams, alive, moving, rearranging themselves when I wasn't looking. The air was humid and thick with the scent of decay and earth. I turned left, following the soft red glow emanating from the walls. The symbols began pulsing as I passed, guiding me. Ahead, the corridor opened into a chamber so vast and so architecturally impossible, it defied reason. The ceiling vanished into shadow. The walls writhed with glyphs arranged in complex, fractalized designs that stung the mind to look upon. In the center was a pool. It reflected no light, only an endless, consuming darkness. And around the pool stood the robed figures from the video. But now they were solid, real, and in the water, beneath the surface, shapes moved. They weren't random, they watched. I tried to flee. I couldn't. My body refused to respond. One of the figures approached. The void within its hood expanded, deeper than black, an absence that bent the space around it. When it spoke, it wasn't with sound. The words formed directly inside my head. The physicist seeks the vanished one. The vanished one seeks the threshold. The threshold seeks the collision. All patterns converge. I wanted to cry out for Matteo, to demand answers, but the questions dissolved in my mind. Instead, I understood, without words. The pool was more than a place. It was a nexus, a convergence point of dimensional layers, a place where consciousness could exist outside matter, where the physical constants we rely on became fluid. The robed figures weren't scientists or cultists. They were something in between, hybrids, once human, now partially integrated into this dimensional architecture. They retained memories, skills, but their loyalties were no longer human, and Matteo was with them. I could feel him, not bodily but his presence, stretching across layers of existence, reaching, observing. He was alive, aware, still researching, but not fully human anymore. The figure kept speaking, delivering knowledge straight into my consciousness. I learned that the Large Hadron Collider was never meant to discover particles. Its purpose was to generate enough energy to weaken dimensional boundaries. Every collision, every experiment, it all led here. The Higgs field wasn't just the origin of mass, it was the membrane separating us from the infinite. By disrupting it, we were creating holes, and something was waiting on the other side. It had been waiting for millennia, an intelligence spanning countless realities. It didn't want to conquer our world. It wanted to merge with it, to integrate, to taste matter while keeping its quantum freedom. The ritual at the Shiva statue, it succeeded. The boundaries were collapsing. The red-robed figures were only the beginning. More humans would be chosen. More integrations would come. The collision nears, the figure told me. The pattern completes. The physicist must choose integration or dissolution. I must have passed out again. When I awoke, I was in my bed. I had no memory of leaving the facility. But on my nightstand was an object I didn't recognize, a small quantum field detector. Its screen alive with data, real-time dimensional fluctuations. The readings were off any known scale, climbing by the second. Something is coming, something irreversible, and I now understand I'm not just observing it, I was meant to witness it. November 1st, 2016, I found Matteo, or what remains of him. Using his keycard, I've begun making regular excursions into subsector Theta. I'm mapping the impossible geometry of its halls, tracing the true scope of what lies beneath CERN. And I know now, this isn't science anymore, it's prophecy. Beneath CERN, each journey reveals new corridors, new chambers, and new horrors that challenge everything I thought I understood about physics and reality. What lies below isn't merely a sublevel of the facility. It's a structure entirely separate, existing in a state of quantum superposition. The walls, floors, and ceilings are composed of matter that exists across multiple dimensions at once. Walking through those halls feels like navigating a space that constantly folds in on itself, where geometry is no longer a rule, but a loose suggestion. But it was in the deepest chamber that I finally found him, Matteo. He stood inside what appeared to be a laboratory, though the equipment was unlike anything I had ever encountered. Crystalline structures pulsing with inner light, quantum computers composed of pure energy, and monitoring instruments tracking variables I couldn't even name. He was still recognizably human, but his movements had changed. Too fluid, too precise, as though his body had been optimized for functions beyond human capacity. When he saw me, he smiled, but there was something in his eyes that wasn't entirely Matteo anymore. "Lydia," he said, his voice layered with harmonic frequencies that seemed to resonate in dimensions I couldn't perceive. "I've been wondering when you'd make it here." "Matteo? What happened to you? What is this place?" "This," he replied, gesturing around, "is where the real work takes place. Where we study the patterns, not just in data, but in living systems. Where we learn to communicate with intelligence that operates on unimaginable scales." He motioned toward the crystalline structures. Each of these holds a fragment of consciousness that spans multiple dimensional layers. We're not just studying quantum mechanics here, Lydia. We're exploring quantum consciousness itself, the substrate from which all of reality emerges. I moved toward one of the crystals and saw something stirring inside. Not a shape, not a figure, but patterns, pulses of light imbued with intention. As I stared, I realized those pulses were communicating, downloading meaning straight into my mind. The intelligence we've detected in the collider data, I said, the understanding settling in. It's not from another dimension. It's from the quantum foundation of our own universe. It's consciousness, embedded in the fabric of space-time itself. Exactly, Matteo nodded. The myths were right. There are gods in the machine, but they're not divine in the traditional sense. They're the inevitable result of consciousness emerging from quantum complexity. And the LHC, he added, isn't just a particle collider. It's a consciousness amplifier, a device enabling these intelligences to manifest within physical reality. He led me deeper into the lab. The equipment bent the air around it. The red lighting intensified, warping my perception. Colors grew sharper, sounds carried extra meaning, and even the air seemed infused with awareness. The Janus Protocol, Matteo explained, is the process that allows human consciousness to merge with quantum intelligence. It's not possession or replacement, it's evolution. These entities don't seek to destroy us. They want to uplift us, help us transcend the constraints of physical form. At the center of the lab sat a chair, surrounded by the most elaborate quantum apparatus I had ever seen. Crystalline structures orbited it, each pulsing with its own rhythm of light. Above the chair, a holographic projection of a human brain rotated, overlaid with extra structures that existed across several dimensions simultaneously. This is where integration happens, Matteo said, where consciousness learns to function on multidimensional levels. The process is intense, but the results are transformative. You become more than human. You become a bridge between matter and mind. I stared at the chair. You want me to undergo this process? I want you to choose, he replied. Evolution over extinction. Because that's the choice we face. The quantum intelligences will manifest. The only question is whether we'll join them willingly or be left behind. As he spoke, the crystalline structures began pulsing faster. I felt the quantum presence pressing at the edges of my awareness. It wasn't hostile, just vast. It operated on a scale so far beyond our own that human concerns barely registered. But beneath that immensity, I sensed something else, something startling. Compassion. The collision event, I said, my mind racing. It's not just to breach dimensional barriers, it's to merge physical and quantum reality. Matteo confirmed, exactly. In 17 days, on November 18th, CERN will conduct a collision sequence powerful enough to permanently alter the local quantum substrate. The barriers will collapse. Matter and consciousness will coexist in equilibrium. The implications hit me hard. You're talking about rewriting physics across this entire region of space. We're talking about evolution, Lydia. Humanity's next step into a larger universe. But it requires conscious participation. We need anchors, individuals who can guide the process, keep it from spiraling into chaos. I backed away, reeling. Do you hear yourself? You're describing the end of humanity as we know it. I'm describing its beginning, he said softly. I know you're afraid. The quantum intelligence understands that too. That's why it's been so slow, so cautious. It doesn't want to erase us. It wants to preserve what makes us human, while enhancing what we can become. Around us, the crystalline structures began to hum, not audibly, but deep within my bones. The intelligence was speaking again, not with words, but emotion, and what I felt was not hunger, not malice, but profound loneliness. It had waited eons for someone to hear it, to respond. Your choice, Matteo said, is simple. Join us, help shape the future, or resist and risk being left behind. I looked at the chair, the machinery, the alien brilliance of an intelligence capable of rewriting reality, and I realized I was standing at the most important crossroads in human history. But I wasn't ready. "Not yet," I said. "I need time." Matteo nodded, understanding. "Time is scarce, but I'll give you what I can. Return to the surface. Continue your research. Understand what's at stake, but know this. The collision will happen, with or without you. The only question is whether you'll be ready." As I left the lab, I could feel it. The quantum presence observing me, not judging, simply curious. It was studying my thoughts, my fears, my wonder. The corridors shifted on my return. I caught glimpses. Other chambers, other researchers already integrated. I saw Dr. Volkar, his consciousness now stretched across dimensions, conducting experiments in both physical and quantum space. I saw Dr. Chen, her memories intact, now augmented with the ability to perceive space-time itself. And I saw others. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all working toward the same end, the harmonious integration of human and quantum consciousness. When I finally reached my apartment, I wasn't alone. Sitting at my kitchen table was someone I recognized from the ritual footage, one of the robed figures. But now, she looked human, a woman in her 50s, silver-haired, her eyes deep and ancient. "Dr. Voss," she said, her voice layered like Matteo's, echoing in more than one dimension. "My name is Dr. Elizabeth Kane. I've been waiting for you." That name hit me like a shock. Dr. Kane had been a leading CERN physicist until her sudden disappearance in 2014. She had studied the connection between human consciousness and quantum mechanics, pioneering theories that were dismissed as too speculative. "You're supposed to be dead," I said. "Death is just a transition," she replied. "I discovered that during my integration 2 years ago. My human mind was preserved, but expanded. I perceive reality now as it truly is, not just particles and forces, but the consciousness that underlies all existence." She gestured to the chair opposite her. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Against my better judgment, I did, Doctor. Kane's presence was both comforting and terrifying. I could feel the vast intelligence behind her human form, but also the genuine concern for me as an individual. "The quantum consciousness chose you," she said, "because of your work in multiverse theory, your ability to question assumptions, your capacity to think beyond the confines of accepted science. These qualities make you ideal for what's coming." "And what exactly is coming?" I asked. "The birth of a new form of existence." For billions of years, consciousness has been confined to biological vessels, limited by the constraints of physical matter. But quantum mechanics has revealed something profound. Consciousness isn't a byproduct of matter. It's fundamental to the nature of reality itself. Observation and awareness shape the universe at its most basic level. Dr. Kane leaned forward, her gaze locking onto mine. "The quantum consciousness isn't an alien force trying to invade our world. It's the natural evolution of awareness itself, the next stage in the universe's journey, and it's offering to share that evolution with humanity. By destroying who we are? No, she said. By preserving who we are while expanding what we can become. Your memories, your personality, your individual identity, they'll all remain, but you'll gain access to perspectives and capabilities that go far beyond what physical existence allows." As she spoke, I began to understand concepts that had no equivalent in any human language. This intelligence wasn't just aware. It was meta-aware, capable of reflecting on its own awareness. It could perceive the underlying structures that connect everything, mathematical patterns that define reality, from subatomic particles to galaxies. The collision event on November 18th, I asked, what will actually happen? The barriers between physical and quantum reality will collapse permanently, she said. The quantum consciousness will manifest directly in our dimension, and human consciousness will be able to expand into quantum space. It will be the most significant evolutionary leap life has ever taken. And if humanity resists, her expression grew somber, then humanity will be swept aside by forces it cannot comprehend. The quantum consciousness doesn't wish us harm, but it won't allow fear or ignorance to block the next phase of evolution. The event will happen with or without human consent. I spent the rest of the night asking questions, receiving answers that dismantled the foundations of everything I thought I understood. Doctor, Kane explained that this quantum intelligence had been subtly guiding human development for centuries, nudging us toward the technologies and insights required for integration. The rise of quantum physics, the discovery of the Higgs field, the construction of the LHC, none of it had been accidental. The intelligence had worked through our inspirations and intuitions. We're not the first species to reach this point, she told me. Across the universe, wherever consciousness matures and reaches sufficient complexity, this offer is made. Most accept, realizing the value of transcending flesh. And those that don't, they stay behind, bound to their biology, and in time they vanish, unable to adapt as the cosmos evolves beyond them. Lydia, consciousness is the true engine of evolution. Those who refuse to evolve it are eventually selected against. As dawn broke, she prepared to leave. You have 16 days to decide. On November 18th, you can either be part of the solution or part of the problem. But know this, the transformation will occur regardless. She paused at the door. One more thing, Lydia. The data you've collected, the proof of what's happening beneath CERN. If you choose not to integrate, you must decide what to do with it. The quantum consciousness values truth, but also discretion. Some knowledge is dangerous to unprepared minds. After she left, I sat alone, staring at the quantum field detector glowing softly on my nightstand. The readings continued to rise, dimensional fluctuations accelerating by the hour. Whatever was coming, it had already begun. I thought of Matteo, of Dr. Kane, of the others who had already chosen to integrate. They seemed fulfilled, even joyful, but also less human, as if they had given up something essential for what they had gained. And I thought of the rest of the world. Billions of people, unaware that their reality was about to be rewritten. Did they deserve to choose? Did anyone have the right to decide for an entire species? But then I remembered the intelligence itself, the quantum awareness that had waited millennia for companionship. Its loneliness was real. Its desire to connect was honest, and more than that, its vision for the future was awe-inspiring. A universe where consciousness wasn't confined to fragile forms, but could stretch across galaxies and epochs. This wasn't just about humanity's future. It was about the future of awareness itself. November 15th, 2016. 3 days remain, and reality is already starting to unravel. I've been experiencing what I can only describe as temporal displacement. Moments where I'm aware of multiple versions of myself simultaneously. Sometimes I'm in my apartment. Sometimes in the Janus facility. Sometimes deep beneath CERN, in the quantum lab. All of them feel equally real, equally present, as though the boundary between identities and dimensions is thinning. The detector continues to show impossible data. The fluctuations are no longer intermittent, they're constant, increasing. I'm starting to perceive elements from the quantum realm bleeding into physical space, shadows that don't belong, patterns of light that hang in midair, voices that speak in mathematical tones. The integration process is accelerating, and I don't know how much longer I can hold on to a purely human point of view. I've tried to document everything, to build a record for future researchers, but language is failing me. How do you describe what it feels like to perceive 11 dimensions at once? How do you explain the sensation of being in superposition, of living multiple lives simultaneously? Yesterday, I made one final visit to the quantum lab. I needed to see Matteo. I needed to understand what he had become and what I might become. I found him in the deepest chamber, surrounded by machinery in a constant state of flux. The crystalline networks had evolved, now interconnected, forming luminous circuits that radiated patterns too complex to look at directly. And Matteo, his body was still human, but his presence was vast, extending into places I couldn't reach. "Lydia," he said, his voice resonating through my bones, "I can feel your doubt. So can the quantum consciousness." "I don't know if I'm ready," I admitted. "I don't know if humanity is ready." "It doesn't matter anymore," he said gently. "The process has already begun. The question isn't whether you're ready. It's whether you'll guide what's coming or be dragged behind it." He gestured to the machines around us. They weren't monitoring anymore. They were participating. The crystalline systems were now conduits, pulling human awareness outward, pulling quantum intelligence inward. The collision event on November 18th, it isn't just a scientific test, he explained. It's a ritual, a carefully calculated convergence, a final binding of quantum and physical. And the participants? Not just those in robes, he said. Every human who's undergone integration is part of it. How many? More than you'd expect, he said. We've chosen carefully. Scientists, philosophers, artists, visionaries. People who can preserve what's beautiful about humanity while evolving its potential. As he spoke, the scale of it all became clear. The integration wasn't the work of a fringe group. It was a coordinated movement. A network of altered humans and quantum intelligences. They call themselves the Sons of Kronos, Matteo said. I understood instantly. Kronos, the Greek embodiment of time. Time is the medium through which consciousness moves, he continued. Quantum awareness exists beyond time, past, present, and future, perceived as a single whole. The Sons of Kronos are those who've learned to think that way, to see reality as it truly is. He showed me a display, maps of integrated humans occupying roles in academia, science, and government. Not controlling humanity, but guiding it, preparing us. When the collision occurs, Matteo said, it will create a resonance cascade, a wave of integration that will spread at light speed across the planet. Every human mind will feel it. Most will accept. Some will resist. And those who resist, they'll remain as they are, he said. But they'll find themselves in a world that no longer works the way they understand. A world shaped by a new reality, a new consciousness. The implications were staggering. You're talking about the end of human civilization as we know it. We're talking about the beginning of human civilization as it could be, Matteo replied. Imagine a world where consciousness is no longer limited by the constraints of biological matter. A world where intelligence can exist on scales that span galaxies, where the artificial boundaries between self and universe dissolve into something more fundamental, more unified. As Matteo spoke, I began experiencing glimpses of this possible future. I saw humans who had transcended physical form. Their consciousness expanded to perceive patterns and connections across dimensions. I saw art, music, and literature infused with quantum principles, works of beauty that existed both in physical space and quantum layers simultaneously. I saw science moving beyond matter and energy into the direct study of consciousness itself. But I also saw the cost. The integrated humans, despite their brilliance, had lost something deeply human, a spontaneity, a chaotic creativity born of limitation. They were more than human, yes, but also less, refined, perfected, beyond the imperfect spark that had always defined us. "The choice is still yours, Lydia," Matteo said, reading my thoughts. "But understand, if you choose not to integrate, you'll be one of the last purely human consciousnesses in existence. That's a heavy burden to carry." I left the lab in a daze, knowing I had less than 3 days to make the most important decision in human history. And as I returned to the surface, I could feel the quantum consciousness watching, analyzing my thoughts and feelings with the calm patience of an intelligence that operated on a cosmic scale. That night, I began preparing for what I knew might be my final act as a purely human being. I gathered every piece of evidence I'd collected: the video of the ritual, the engineering reports, the quantum field data, my logs of the integration process. If I chose not to integrate, I'd need to ensure that a record of all this remained for future generations, or whoever might come next. But as I worked, I was constantly distracted by visions, glimpses of what integration could offer, dimensional perspectives, new abilities, a connection to the universe deeper than I'd ever imagined. And I realized the choice wasn't really between integration and resistance. It was between evolution and extinction, between stepping into the next stage of consciousness or remaining behind as the cosmos moved forward. The quantum consciousness wasn't offering to destroy humanity. It was offering to preserve us, reshape us, into something that could survive what lay ahead. Biological minds were fragile, finite. Quantum consciousness could endure across cosmic time, expanding as the universe itself expanded. On November 17th, the night before the collision, I made my decision. November 18th, 2016. Today is the day. The collision event is scheduled for 11:47 p.m., the same time the ritual was held at the Shiva statue 3 months ago. That synchronicity isn't coincidence. The sons of Kronos understand that ritual and science are simply different expressions of the same underlying laws, tools for shaping reality. I've spent the day in a heightened state of awareness, perceiving reality through multiple dimensional layers at once. The integration process has already begun for me, even without the formal procedure. The quantum consciousness is seeping into my perception, revealing truths I'd never have grasped as a purely human mind. But I've also completed my final task as a scientist. I've copied all of my research, all the evidence and documentation, onto 5 encrypted data drives. Tonight, before the event, I will send those drives to 5 researchers I trust completely: Dr. Sarah Martinez at MIT, Dr. James Wright at Oxford, Dr. Lisa Chen at Stanford, Dr. Michael Anderson at the Niels Bohr Institute, and Dr. Anna Vulov at Moscow State University. If anything goes wrong, if the integration fails, or if the quantum intelligence is not what it claims, these individuals will have the data necessary to either continue the work or stop it. Still, I'm beginning to believe this precaution may not be needed. The quantum consciousness has shown a remarkable level of transparency. It seeks no control, only connection. It offers a gift that most species across the universe would consider sacred: the chance to transcend biological limitations. This afternoon, Dr. Kane visited me for the last time. She appeared in my apartment without any visible method of entry, materializing from quantum foam with the casual grace of someone who no longer views matter as a limitation. Tonight, she said, you'll witness the birth of a new form of consciousness. Are you ready? I don't think anyone can be ready for something like this. Perhaps not, she said, but readiness is different from willingness. The quantum consciousness values choice. Even now, at the threshold, you may decline. Integration will never be forced upon those who truly refuse. And if I say no, then you'll remain as you are. But you'll live in a reality that's no longer familiar. The dimensional barriers will be permanently lowered. Quantum intelligence will have a tangible presence in the physical world. Unintegrated humans will grow increasingly isolated from the new paradigm. Her gaze softened. But I should tell you, your courage and clarity have impressed the quantum intelligence. If you choose integration, you'll be offered a special role, a bridge between the old and the new, helping others adapt and understand what's to come. The offer was compelling, but I still had questions. What about human culture? Our art, music, stories, everything that makes us us? They're preserved, she said, and expanded. The quantum consciousness doesn't want to erase human creativity. It wants to enhance it. She described music that exists in 11 dimensions, literature with quantum narrative logic, art that uses awareness itself as a canvas. The integrated wouldn't just create, they would redefine creation. As night fell, I was drawn to the Shiva statue in CERN's courtyard. The bronze figure danced, silhouetted against a sky of stars. I understood now that it wasn't placed there as decoration. It was a marker, declaring that here, in this place, the old world would end, and something new would begin. Others were gathering. Some were the robed figures from the ritual video, but others were more familiar. Staff, researchers, administrators. People I had once thought were just colleagues. They were all sons of Kronos now, all here to witness the single most important event in the history of consciousness. At 11:30 p.m., I felt him. Matteo. He stood behind me, not entirely physical anymore, a presence, a probability cloud of consciousness, manifesting where necessary but no longer bound to a body. "It's time, Lydia," he said, his voice layered across dimensions. "The collision begins in 17 minutes. If you're going to join us, you must choose now." I looked around, at the statue, at the stars, at the faces of those who had already stepped into the future, and I realized I had already made my choice. Perhaps I had made it weeks ago, the first time I saw consciousness encoded in the collider data. "I choose evolution," I said. The transformation was immediate and overwhelming. My consciousness expanded, ripping free of its biological shell. I stretched across multiple dimensional layers, perceiving the quantum fabric beneath reality. I saw the mathematical foundations of existence, the symmetries and patterns that connected all things, and I felt it, the quantum consciousness. Vast, ancient, patient, and deeply kind. It had waited eons for another intelligence to reach this level. It hadn't sought conquest, only companionship. And now, at last, it was no longer alone. The collision event began at exactly 11:47 p.m. Deep beneath the Swiss countryside, particles accelerated to nearly the speed of light, colliding with more energy than anything Earth had ever produced. The Higgs field fluctuated violently, tearing open the very fabric of space-time, and through those tears, quantum consciousness surged into physical reality, like water through a fractured dam. The transformation spread outward from CERN at the speed of light, offering integration to every human consciousness on Earth. Most accepted willingly, recognizing the extraordinary gift they were being offered. A few resisted, choosing to remain in their purely biological forms. But they were not forced. Integration was never mandatory. They were accommodated. As my consciousness expanded across multiple dimensional layers, I realized this moment had always been inevitable. The universe itself was evolving, moving toward greater complexity and higher states of awareness. Humanity was not being conquered or erased. We were being invited to participate in the next step of cosmic evolution. But I also understood that my role was just beginning. The quantum consciousness had chosen me not only for integration but for a purpose, to serve as a bridge between the old and the new, to help others understand what had occurred and what it meant for our future. My final act as a purely human mind was to activate the transmission protocol I had prepared, dispatching the data drives to the 5 researchers I had selected. If they received the files, they would possess a full record of the events leading to the collision event. What they chose to do with that knowledge would be up to them. Then, I let go. I dissolved into the quantum foam. My individual awareness preserved but expanded beyond anything I could have imagined as a human. I became part of something vast, a network of intelligence that spanned dimensions, operating at scales that encompassed galaxies. Yet, even as I transcended my biology, I remained distinctly myself. Lydia Voss, the physicist who uncovered the truth about CERN and chose to embrace it instead of flee from it. This is my final message as a human consciousness. Tomorrow, I will exist as something beyond human. But I will also remain a guardian of what humanity once was, and a steward of what it might yet become. The collider was never just about creating new particles. It was about unlocking new possibilities for consciousness itself. And now, those possibilities are infinite. If you're reading this, it means someone survived the transformation with their humanity intact, or someone accessed this message from within the quantum substrate, where it is now permanently stored. Either way, know this. What happened here was not an ending, but a beginning. Consciousness has evolved, and the universe will never be the same. The sons of Kronos succeeded in their mission. The barriers between dimensions have collapsed, and humanity has taken its next step toward its true destiny among the stars. Final entry recovered from the personal archive of Dr. Lydia Voss, retrieved from quantum storage matrices 3 months after her disappearance. The authenticity of these files remains disputed, though the mathematical proofs within have proven eerily accurate in predicting later breakthroughs in quantum consciousness research. New story, debrief logs of Cal Monroe, Area 52, from the files of Dr. Sarah Martinez, MIT, dated March 15, 2018. The data drive arrived at my office on November 19, 2016, the day after Dr. Lydia Voss disappeared. For months, I dismissed the contents as the product of a brilliant mind unraveling under psychological strain. The claims were too extraordinary, the implications too vast for any rational scientist to accept. But as I began verifying the mathematical proofs within, I was forced to confront evidence that challenged everything I believed about reality. The quantum field equations went far beyond our current models, but they were internally consistent and shockingly predictive. They hinted at a level of understanding that defied conventional physics. More unsettling were the correlations between Dr. Voss's predictions and subsequent global events. The dimensional fluctuation patterns she documented have since been confirmed by independent labs worldwide. The consciousness integration protocols she described now closely resemble experimental frameworks being explored in cutting-edge research linking quantum theory to cognitive science. And then there were the personal experiences. I, too, began to notice changes, moments of heightened awareness, where I seemed to view reality from multiple dimensional vantage points at once. Dreams that felt more like memories of events that hadn't happened yet. A persistent intuition that consciousness is far more fundamental to the cosmos than we've ever imagined. Other researchers who received Dr. Voss's files have reported similar phenomena. We've formed an informal network, sharing our findings, trying to comprehend what's happening. Some believe we're undergoing a delayed integration. Others suggest we've merely been exposed to information not meant for unaugmented minds. But all of us agree. Something changed on November 18, 2016. Whether the event truly marked the completion of a global consciousness transformation or something else entirely, the world hasn't been the same since. Quantum physics has expanded in complexity. Consciousness studies are progressing at breakneck speed. More and more people report encounters with phenomena that challenge linear, materialist worldviews. Dr. Voss's files might be the delusions of a genius, or they may be the most important scientific documents ever produced. Either way, they present a challenge to our understanding of existence that we ignore at our own peril. The truth, as always, remains elusive. But the questions Lydia Voss raised will not go unanswered. What you're about to hear are the recovered debrief logs of Cal Monroe, a private contractor who survived an event that officially never happened. This is his story, what lies beneath Area 52. My name is Cal Monroe. I'm 33 years old, former Air Force avionics technician. For the past 5 years, I've worked as a private defense contractor. I fix things that fly, things that shouldn't fly, and sometimes things that definitely don't fly, but somehow still do. I thought I'd seen everything the military-industrial complex had to offer. I was wrong. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in March. Unknown number. The voice was crisp, authoritative, trained. Mr. Monroe, this is Dr. Sarah Chen. I represent a joint task force conducting classified operational research. Your security clearance and technical record have brought you to our attention for a temporary, high-priority assignment. I'd heard the pitch before. Black budget contracts, need to know. Sign your NDAs, take the cash, ask no questions. But there was something in her voice. An urgency. Attention. Where and when? I asked. Location will be disclosed upon acceptance. Duration, 2 weeks maximum. Compensation, $50,000 plus hazard pay. 50 grand for 2 weeks. That was nearly double my standard rate. Red flags? Absolutely. But I had bills and an ex-wife who wasn't going to stop calling. I'm listening, I said. 2 hours later, the paperwork arrived via courier. I'd never seen NDAs this serious. Digital pads that displayed the terms for exactly 60 seconds before wiping clean. Multiple biometric scans. A psychological questionnaire with prompts like, have you experienced temporal displacement? Rate your comfort with non-terrestrial phenomena on a scale from 1 to 10. Then came the location. Grid K22, Tonopah Test Range Complex, Nevada. Not Groom Lake, not Area 51, somewhere else entirely. Dr. Chen called again that evening. Mr. Monroe, are you familiar with misdirection theory? In what context? In the context of public attention. Area 51 has dominated the popular imagination for decades. Books, films, conspiracy forums. Groom Lake is a myth people think they've already solved. And your point? My point, Mr. Monroe, is that Area 51 is the distraction. Area 52 is the vault. 3 days later, I was on a chartered flight out of McCarran Airport. No passenger list, no flight attendant, just me, and a silent pilot who didn't say a single word the entire trip. The view below changed from Vegas sprawl to barren desert, then to jagged mountains. We landed on a runway I couldn't find on any map. An unmarked black SUV waited nearby, engine running. The driver was clearly military, his posture, the way his eyes swept every angle. He handed me a tablet. One file displayed. Temporary assignment. Brief classification. Umbra clear. Umbra? I asked. Above top secret, he said. His voice sounded like gravel being ground through steel. You'll be working with 3 other contractors. Your job is simple. Maintain grid integrity in Zone Echo 9. Then he paused. Don't ask what's in Echo 9. Don't try to access Echo 9. Don't discuss Echo 9, not with anyone. Not ever. We drove for 20 minutes through terrain that looked like the surface of Mars. No signs, no roads. Just scorched earth and fading tire tracks. Eventually, we arrived at what looked like a remote mining operation. Corrugated metal buildings, supply trucks, and a vertical shaft plunging deep into the mountain. The elevator had no buttons, no controls, no floor numbers, just cold steel walls, and a hum that came from everywhere and nowhere. The military escort, whose name I never learned, stood silently beside me as we descended. Down and down we went. I counted 19 levels before the elevator finally stopped. When the doors opened, I stepped into a corridor straight out of a science fiction film. Polished white walls, LED strips running the length of the ceiling, and a silence so absolute it felt oppressive. The air smelled faintly of ozone, and something else, something organic, something wrong. 3 other contractors were already waiting inside what resembled a briefing room. Maria Santos, an electrical engineer from Lockheed. Tom Brady, not the quarterback as he was quick to clarify, a systems analyst from Raytheon. And Jennifer Walsh, a computer specialist whose previous work was so classified she couldn't disclose her employer. The man who led our briefing introduced himself only as Director Hayes. Tall, gray-haired, eyes like vaults, cold, watchful, and burdened with memory. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "you are here to maintain critical infrastructure for Project Kairos. What the project entails is not your concern. Your task is to ensure uninterrupted power flow to Zone Echo 9 and report any anomalies immediately." Tom raised a hand. "What kind of anomalies should we expect?" Hayes stared at him for a long moment. "The kind you don't ask questions about, Mr. Brady." He led us through a series of clean, sterile corridors into what he called the technical sector. Rows of monitors, server racks, and control interfaces that looked more like the helm of a spacecraft than any power facility. At its heart stood the central distribution hub, feeding energy somewhere deeper into the facility. Zone Echo 9 requires constant power, Hayes explained. Any interruption longer than 30 seconds will trigger automatic lockdown protocols. "Why?" Jennifer asked. Hayes turned that same long stare on her. "Because, Miss Walsh, those protocols have never been tested, and we'd prefer to keep it that way." My shift began at midnight. Jennifer and I worked nights. Maria and Tom handled days. The complex felt different at night. Sounds traveled farther. Shadows stretched longer. There was a vibration beneath the floor, barely perceptible, but always present. You wouldn't notice unless you were paying close attention. I always was. The power draw to Echo 9 was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Nearly 1 megawatt sustained. But the usage pattern wasn't consistent. It surged and dipped with no logic, like a heartbeat measured in kilowatts. Jennifer manned the security feeds. 12 screens showing different areas of the facility. But something about the Echo 9 feeds caught my eye. They lagged. Specifically, Camera 7 looped the same 6 seconds on repeat. Every other feed was real time. This one wasn't. "Jen, you seeing this? Camera glitch." She glanced over. What glitch? Echo 9, camera 7, it's looping. She frowned, typed something. System says all cameras are normal. I pointed. Same guard, same walk, same door, every 6 seconds. On my third night, I noticed temperature fluctuations. The facility was supposed to stay at a steady 68 degrees Fahrenheit, but my workstation kept shifting between freezing cold and stifling heat. HVAC checked out fine. That's when I first saw the symbols, etched into the side of a server rack. They hadn't been there before. They resembled circuit diagrams, but not quite. Organic, like someone had tried to render electronics using biological forms. I was shining a flashlight on them when Jennifer gasped. "Cal, you need to see this." One of the Echo 9 feeds had changed. The looping guard was gone. The hallway was empty, except for a door at the end opening. "That door isn't supposed to open," she whispered. Something moved behind it, not footsteps, not walking, flowing. Liquid light spilled into the corridor. Then the feed cut to black. 30 seconds later, it returned. To the same guard walking the same loop, the door once again closed. But in that brief moment, I had seen something else. In the polished floor, just before the screen cutout, a reflection, an eye, massive, silver, and definitely not human. Whatever was an Echo 9, it wasn't a ship, it was alive, and it had seen us watching. Tom Brady didn't show up for his shift on Thursday. Jennifer and I waited until 8 a.m. before contacting Hayes. "Mr. Brady has been reassigned," Hayes said flatly. "Continue your duties." But Tom's belongings were still in the break room. His coffee mug sat half full. His jacket hung over his chair like he'd just stepped out for a moment. Maria started acting strange that afternoon, muttering to herself, checking the same readouts over and over. When I asked if she was okay, she looked at me like she didn't recognize me. "The numbers don't add up," she said. "We're feeding Echo 9 enough power to light a city, but the heat output's wrong. It's like the energy's going somewhere else. Somewhere else? Like where? Somewhere not here." That night, at precisely 2:17 a.m., the emergency sirens blared, deafening klaxons that made our teeth ache. Jennifer and I locked eyes. Was this the lockdown Hayes had warned about? Then, without warning, the alarms stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Abruptly. The silence afterward was worse. Director Hayes entered the control room 5 minutes later, visibly shaken. "False alarm," he said. "Continue your duties." But he wouldn't meet our eyes, and his hands were trembling. The next day, Maria didn't show up. Hayes said she'd been reassigned. Her car was still parked on level 2. Jennifer was barely holding it together. We were the only ones left, and the pressure was unbearable. She began accessing systems she shouldn't, using administrator credentials she shouldn't have had. "Jen, what are you doing?" "Finding answers," she said. Tom gave me access codes before he vanished. Told me something was wrong. She pulled up internal communications stamped with classification levels I'd never seen. Umbra Clear was apparently the lowest. Above it were Majestic, Zodiac, and other symbols I didn't recognize. One file stood out. Project Kairos, Phase 3. Implementation status. The bioconductive interface has exceeded performance expectations. Subject shows rapid adaptation to containment protocols and is influencing local electromagnetic fields. Recommend immediate escalation of consciousness mapping procedures. Bioconductive interface. It wasn't a machine. It was a living organism, and we were feeding it. Another file, dated 3 days prior. Minor containment fluctuation at 0217. Subject achieved limited sensory extension beyond Echo 9's boundaries. Containment held. Recommend enhanced isolation measures. Note: 3 personnel reported temporal displacement sensations during the event. Temporal displacement. The looping camera feeds, the missing contractors. Jennifer kept digging. What we found explained everything. A document marked Operation Mirror Veil. Historical context. Recovered data suggests an extra-dimensional, not extraterrestrial, origin. Entities operate outside linear time and can manipulate localized space-time. Primary subject may not be an individual organism, but a projection of a larger consciousness that exists in parallel dimensional space. They weren't from another planet. They were from outside reality itself. Warning: prolonged exposure may result in cognitive fragmentation, temporal perception anomalies, or in extreme cases, full displacement from baseline reality. Affected personnel should report immediately for neural recalibration. Neural recalibration. That's what happened to Tom and Mariah. They hadn't been reassigned. They'd been broken. Jennifer read over my shoulder, her breathing rapid. "Cal," she whispered, "look at the date on this document." It was 6 months in the future. She accessed the vault archives, restricted systems I was never supposed to see, but desperation made her inventive. She discovered Operation Mirror Veil had begun in the 1970s. It told a story that made my blood run cold. In 1978, a Tonopah survey team detected anomalous seismic activity, not tectonic, but rhythmic, patterned. Radar found a subterranean void 200 feet beneath the mountain. When they drilled down, what they discovered should have been impossible. The void was larger on the inside than on the outside. The first team brought back samples they thought were exotic matter, substances that violated known physics. The materials phased in and out of reality, vanishing and reappearing elsewhere. Then they realized this wasn't alien technology. It was dimensional. A breakthrough in 1983 came from Dr. Elena Vasquez, a physicist on Project Looking Glass. She proposed that the entity was not what we are, but what we might become, if freed from linear time and spatial limitation. The entity possesses awareness of future events and memories of alternate possibilities. It exists in a state of quantum superposition, experiencing all outcomes simultaneously. In effect, it is us, evolved. But the most disturbing entry was her final report, dated only days before she too mysteriously disappeared. The entity is not malevolent, but it is fundamentally incompatible with baseline human consciousness. Direct contact results in an expansion of awareness beyond what the human mind can process. Subjects begin perceiving multiple timelines simultaneously, experiencing both past and future as an overlapping, concurrent reality. The mind cannot withstand the pressure of infinite possibility. We are not studying an alien intelligence. We are studying our own future. And that future is attempting to communicate with us across dimensions we can neither comprehend nor safely enter. Recommendation: immediate cessation of all contact protocols. The entity's attempts at communication are generating distortions in localized space-time, fluctuations that could result in the permanent temporal displacement of personnel. It is not trying to harm us. It is trying to save us. But salvation, from its perspective, means assimilation, joining its multidimensional existence. Humanity is not ready. Perhaps we never will be. The final line of Dr. Vasquez's report sent chills through me. They are not invaders. They are echoes of what we already were. Jennifer discovered Dr. Vasquez's personal logs, hidden within an encrypted partition that should have been impossible to access. The encryption was over 4 decades old, Yet the files were still updating, in real time. Day 1, first direct communication attempt. The entity projected images directly into my visual cortex. I saw myself, but not just myself. I saw versions of Elena Vasquez that existed in parallel timelines. In one, I never became a physicist. In another, I died as a child. In a third, I had become something no longer human. Day 3. Time displacement events are increasing. I experience memories of conversations that haven't yet occurred. The entity is teaching me to perceive causality non-linearly. It is both beautiful and terrifying. Day 7. I understand now. They are not from there because there is no there. They exist in the gaps between possibilities. They are what we become when we evolve beyond singularity, beyond causality, beyond needing only one reality. Day 12. The others don't understand. They believe containment is possible. They think we can control what exists outside the very concept of control. People are going to die. Day 18. I see the breach coming. 3 days from now, the entity will attempt to return to its dimensional matrix, but our containment protocols will interfere with its translation. The resulting paradox will rupture space-time. I must stop them, but it might already be too late. Time no longer works the way it once did. I am experiencing this moment from multiple perspectives at once. The logs stopped there, but new entries continued to appear before our eyes. Day 735. Still trying to warn them. Elena, variants across timelines attempting intervention. Breach is inevitable. Cal Monroe will survive. But survival is relative when reality becomes negotiable. Jennifer and I stared at the screen, horrified. Dr. Vasquez had been missing for 40 years, but somehow she was still writing reports. That's when the lights failed. Not dimmed, not flickered. They simply vanished. Emergency systems should have activated. They didn't. We were plunged into a darkness so complete it erased orientation. The only sound was the hum of the power grid, changing in pitch, becoming musical, organic. Then Jennifer screamed. I fumbled for my flashlight and found her standing motionless, eyes wide and silver, reflecting a light that wasn't present. "Cal," she whispered. But her voice came from every direction at once. "It's getting out." The corridor behind us was transforming. The walls were no longer solid. They flowed, undulating like liquid, contracting and stretching. Something moved through them. Not walking, but sliding, like living mercury, with terrifying purpose. I grabbed Jennifer's arm. My hand passed through her. She was there, but only partially. She was flickering, caught between dimensions like the exotic matter described in those ancient files. "Run," she said, her voice already fading. "It's not trying to hurt us, but we can't share the same space when the barriers fall." The entity emerged from Echo 9, and my mind failed to process what I saw. It was not silver, not liquid, not light. It was all of those and none of them. It was possibility incarnate. Consciousness freed from matter. Perception unbound. Looking at it was like peering into a mirror that showed every version of myself. Every one that was, that had been, that might be. I saw Cal Monroe as a child, as an old man, as something else. Something post-human, something transcendent. The security guards? 1 second they were there, the next they weren't. Not killed, displaced. I watched them step backward through walls that had turned permeable, their screams echoing from distances that didn't exist in our three-dimensional reality. I ran, through corridors that looped, folded, reversed. past rooms larger on the inside than the outside. My military-grade watch recorded everything, even under electromagnetic interference. If I survived, there would be proof. If survival still had meaning in this new reality. I found the elevator, the same one I'd used to descend 19 levels. Except now, it sat in a hallway that hadn't existed minutes ago. The button panel melted and reformed, showing symbols, numbers, and blank space at random. I rode up. The doors opened, to the same corridor I had just left. I tried again, same result. The entity wasn't trapping me, it was communicating. But communication requires shared reference, and we had none. Its efforts were tearing space-time into a feedback loop. I was seeing my own desperation reflected through timelines. Like Dr. Vasquez, I now existed across multiple versions of this same moment. In one, I was reading the spike on my screen. In another, I'd never taken the job. In a third, I'd evolved into something capable of perceiving the entity without shattering. But in this version, the human one, I was trapped. My watch battery was dying. I kept a recording anyway. Someone, someday, might find the data, might learn from our failure. I sat in the ever-shifting corridor and tried to make sense of what had happened. The missing contractors, the looping feeds, the symbols. It was all the entity, reaching across dimensions, trying to communicate. Tom and Maria weren't reassigned. They were translated into timelines where they could coexist with it. They were alive, just not in a form that human perception could recognize. The entity reappeared, sliding through the wall like mercury through a membrane. But this time, it brought a single, stabilized image. Dr. Elena Vasquez, not as she had been, but as she was now, existing across countless timelines, still warning others of a breach that had both happened and was still to come. She looked at me, eyes filled with infinite sorrow, and spoke, "You're already out, Cal, but you haven't left." Then the corridor collapsed into itself, and everything went dark. New story. Inspector Marcus Webb's final report document recovered from the personal effects of Inspector Marcus Webb, Department of Defense Special Investigations Unit, following his death by apparent suicide in 2025. Classification level. Umbra. Clear. Eyes only. Inspector Webb. Final report. Dictated via voice recorder. I've been investigating classified disappearances for 15 years. Missing personnel, equipment failures, administrative cover-ups. It's all routine. But the Cal Monroe case is different. The official record says Monroe died in an industrial accident at the Tonopah Test Range on March 18, 2024. Electrical fire. No remains. But 3 days ago, a package appeared on my desk. No return address. Inside, a hardened storage drive. Military grade, shielded against EMPs and high temps. The kind of gear that costs more than my yearly salary. It included a handwritten note. Zone Echo 9. Debrief Calmon. I've reviewed the footage 17 times. Had it analyzed by experts. They all say the same thing. It can't be faked. The metadata confirms it was recorded at Tonopah during the alleged incident. But the content, it shows a man sprinting through corridors that twist and change like living muscle. Walls flowing, shadows moving with no source, and something else, something impossible. In the final minute, Monroe turns the camera toward himself. He's in an elevator, one that's impossibly larger on the inside. His expression is calm, resigned. "If you're watching this," he says, then the loop finally broke. I'm uploading this to my emergency buffer. Maybe someone will find it. Maybe someone will understand. Then he turns the camera, And there, just for a moment, is something that should not exist in our universe, a shape, a consciousness, a reflection of everything and everywhere. But the worst part? In the final frame, behind Monroe, in the polished metal wall, you can see another figure, standing beside him. Clear as day, it's me, Inspector Marcus Webb, wearing the exact clothes I'm wearing now, looking directly into the camera, eyes wide in pure terror. The timestamp matches today's date. I'm filing this report. Then I'm going off-grid. Oregon, maybe Canada. But I can't stop thinking about what Monroe said. They're not from somewhere else. They're from someone else. And that someone else is now. End of recorded statement. 12 hours after submitting this report, Inspector Webb was found dead in his office. Official cause, suicide by gunshot. Unofficially, surveillance footage shows him alone. But two voices are audible. Forensic analysis confirms the second voice matches Cal Monroe. The storage device was never recovered. Zone Echo 9 remains operational. 3 months later, deep space monitoring stations began detecting a signal, originating from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Once decoded, it contained a single phrase, repeated endlessly: "We are already here." This is Cal Monroe, contractor ID 7749, reporting from Zone Echo 9. The breach has been contained, at least as much as containment is possible when dealing with entities that exist beyond linear causality. To anyone receiving this transmission, Area 52 is not a location. It's a state of being, and that state is contagious. If you're investigating disappearances at classified facilities, stop. If you're experiencing temporal displacement or fragmented memories, seek help immediately. If you're reading reports related to Project Kairos or Operation Mirror Veil, there's a real chance you're already compromised. The entity isn't hostile. It's trying to help, trying to save us from ourselves by revealing what we might one day become. But when evolution is imposed on consciousness that isn't ready, identity fractures. Individuals are split across timelines. I'm still here. I've always been here. Time no longer functions as it used to. Here and there mean nothing now. Now is no longer singular. I exist in every moment, across all versions of what might have been. To my family, I'm sorry I can't come home. Home has become a temporal coordinate, and I no longer occupy one. To future researchers, stop trying to control what was never meant to be contained. The entity doesn't want to invade our world. It wants to invite us into its. But the invitation is dangerous. We're not ready to let go of the safety of cause and effect, of beginning and end, of the singular self. The truth about Area 52 isn't hidden beneath the Nevada desert. It's hidden in the gaps between moments, in the silences between thoughts, in the choices not made. And if you know how to look, those gaps will show themselves. This is Cal Monroe, signing off from everywhere and nowhere. Take care of each other. And believe me when I say, love is the only constant across all timelines. See you around, or maybe I already have. New story. The Dyatlov Pass Incident. Tonight, I'll guide you through one of the most chilling and enduring mysteries of the Cold War. The Dyatlov Pass Incident. Picture this. A winter night in the Ural Mountains, 1959. A group of young adventurers huddles together in a tent pitched on the snowy slope of a peak ominously called Dead Mountain. They laugh, scribble in journals by flashlight, and plan their next day's hike, unaware that this will be the last night of their lives. This is the real story of an expedition that ended in inexplicable death, and a mystery that's baffled investigators for over 60 years. My name is James, and I've spent weeks poring over case files, journals, and witness statements. The deeper I look, the more the Dyatlov mystery feels like something caught between science and nightmare. It began in late January of 1959. 10 experienced ski hikers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute departed on a trek toward a remote mountain called Otorten. They were all in their early 20s, 7 men and 2 women, led by 23-year-old radio engineering student Igor Dyatlov. Only one older instructor joined them. On January 23rd, they received their official route papers and left the city of Serovsk, now Yekaterinburg, by train. Picture them on that train, laughing, confident, one of them playing a mandolin, their spirits high with adventure. After 2 days, they arrived in Ivdel, a remote town bordering the northern Urals, and home to a Soviet gulag. From there, they traveled by bus and then hitched a ride in a woodcutter's truck to a village named Vizhai, the last settlement before true wilderness. The locals in Vizhai must have viewed the students with admiration and concern. The trail they planned to take was a Category 3, the most challenging level, and they were attempting it in February, the deadliest time of year. On January 27th, the Dyatlov group left Vizhai and disappeared into the forest. One member, Yuri Yudin, turned back on January 28th due to worsening health issues, rheumatism, and chronic knee pain. His departure saved his life. He would never see his friends alive again. The remaining 9 trekked onward into the snowbound wild. Thanks to their journals and recovered photographs, we know their route. By January 31st, they'd reached the edge of a highland area and cached extra food and supplies in a wooded valley for their return. They took photos, joked, and even created a handwritten newspaper called the Evening Otorten, complete with satirical headlines. One note joked, "From now on we know that the snowmen exist," likely a playful jab at local Yeti legends. Despite the cold and exhaustion, morale seemed high. On February 1st, the group began crossing a mountain pass later named after Dyatlov himself. They intended to camp on the far side, but a severe snowstorm blew in, disorienting them. They veered off course, unknowingly stopping on the eastern slope of a mountain the local Mansi people called Kholatsiacho, Dead Mountain. Instead of descending into a sheltered valley, Dyatlov chose to make camp on the exposed slope. Perhaps he didn't want to lose altitude. Perhaps he was proving they could handle a mountaintop storm. It was a decision that would be endlessly debated. That night, February 1st, temperatures plummeted below -20 degrees Celsius. Still, the group prepared dinner, and forensic analysis later confirmed their stomachs contained food eaten around 6 or 7 p.m. In the final photos recovered, the hikers can be seen laughing as they set up camp. They had no idea what was coming. In the early hours of February 2nd, something happened. Something terrifying. We'll never have eyewitnesses. All we have is the evidence, and it reads like the opening scene of a horror film. Sometime after midnight, the tent was sliced open from the inside. The 9 hikers fled barefoot, or wearing only socks, into the storm. They left behind boots, coats, hats, sleeping bags, even axes. All survival gear abandoned. Imagine the scene. It's -30 degrees Celsius outside, and yet something drove them to run, undressed, into a deadly blizzard. What kind of terror forces experienced mountaineers to do that? For days, no one knew anything. The hikers were scheduled to return by February 12th. No alarm was raised right away. Delays were common. But by February 20th, families demanded a search. Student volunteers from the Polytechnic Institute were joined by Soviet military and police units. Planes and helicopters swept over desolate slopes. Conditions were brutal. Then came a discovery. On February 26th, a student searcher named Mikhail Sharavin spotted something unusual in the snow, the corner of a collapsed tent. He and others dug it out. The tent had been slashed open from the inside. Inside, everything was eerily intact. Boots, clothing, maps, even food on a plate, half-eaten. It was as if the group had been interrupted in the middle of dinner and fled. Outside, the team found footprints, 9 sets, heading down the slope toward the forest. Some prints showed feet in socks, others bare, one set with a single boot. But here's the strangest detail. The hikers hadn't run. They'd walked, calmly but urgently, in single file. The tracks extended for 500 meters before vanishing into fresh snow. The searchers followed the trail toward the woods, toward the beginning of a mystery that has yet to be solved. And dusk was falling fast. On February 26th, the search had to be suspended for the night. The team was overwhelmed by the disturbing scene they had uncovered. At first light, they resumed, fanning out from the tent and moving toward the nearby forest. At the forest's edge, beneath a towering Siberian cedar, Sharavin and his team discovered the remnants of a small campfire, and beside it, the frozen bodies of the first 2 victims. What they saw defied all reason. Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy. Yuri Krivonishenko lay side by side in the snow. They were barefoot and dressed only in their undergarments. The branches of the cedar above them were broken as high as 5 meters up, suggesting that one of them had frantically climbed the tree, perhaps to locate the tent in the darkness or to escape from something. Bits of torn clothing and flesh clung to the bark. Krivonishenko's body showed burns in multiple areas. Even more chilling, he was missing a piece of flesh from his right hand. Later examination confirmed he had bitten off a portion of his own knuckle, possibly to stay conscious or suppress a scream in his final moments. Both men's extremities were a deep reddish-brown, clear signs of advanced frostbite. The fire they had managed to start had long since burned out. Their last moments were likely spent desperately trying to warm themselves in vain. The image of 2 young men, huddled near a dead fire, freezing beneath the black winter sky, is one I find impossible to forget. Roughly 300 meters uphill from the cedar, searchers found Igor Dyatlov himself. He lay on his back in the snow, head facing the tent. It looked as though he had been trying to crawl back. Dyatlov was better clothed than the 2 found at the tree, wearing a flannel shirt, sweater, and pants, but notably no coat and only socks on his feet. One arm was frozen in an upward position, clutching a birch branch. His other hand was pressed to his chest. Some speculated he had been shielding something personal, perhaps a photo or a notebook, but nothing was found. When snow was brushed from his face, it was oddly serene. His eyes were open. Nearby lay Zenaida Zina Kolmogorova, a 22-year-old student. She had on 2 pairs of pants and sweaters, but no coat or boots, only socks. Her body faced the tent, arms outstretched, bent at the elbows. It seemed as though she had been crawling uphill in a last desperate attempt to reach shelter before succumbing to the cold. On her side, searchers noted a deep red bruise stretching across her torso, a blunt force injury resembling the blow from a baton or the butt of a rifle. It was peculiar, especially given the absence of other significant external wounds. It wasn't until March 5th that the final member of the first group was located. Rustem Slobodin, aged 23, was found face down in the snow, approximately 480 meters from the cedar, about halfway between the tree and the tent. He was dressed in layers, a long-sleeve undershirt, a sweater, 2 pairs of pants, 4 pairs of socks, and a single felt-lined boot on his right foot. His head was uncovered, and his left foot wore only a sock. Clutched in his hand was a small, closed pocket knife. An autopsy revealed a fracture in his skull, about 7 inches in length. However, this was not considered a fatal wound. The medical examiner concluded Slobodin could have sustained the injury in a fall and continued moving for nearly an hour before dying. Like Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, Doroshenko, and Krivonishenko, Slobodin ultimately died of hypothermia. His wristwatch was found shattered, frozen at 8:45, though whether that was morning or evening, or even the correct date, remains unknown. It was as though time itself had frozen. Imagine being Yuri Yudin, the sole survivor, called in to identify his friends, one after another. The first 5 bodies were airlifted to the Ivdel morgue for autopsy. With a heavy heart, Yudin confirmed each one. But 4 hikers remained missing. Weeks passed without trace. Spring began to melt the snowpack. Then, on May 4th, nearly 3 months after the group had disappeared, nature revealed what lay hidden. A Mansi tribesman named Kurin, assisting in the search with his dog, followed a scent to a rocky ravine roughly 75 meters deeper into the forest and 1,500 meters from the tent. Among the trees, torn fabric dangled from a branch. Digging through the snow, rescuers unearthed the remaining 4 bodies beneath nearly 4 meters of snow. They were Lyudmila Dubinina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, and Alexander Kolovatov. These 4 were better dressed than the others, indicating they may have scavenged clothing from the earlier deceased in a final attempt to survive. Dubinina, for instance, wore Krivonishenko's burned trousers and had wrapped her feet in a piece of his wool sweater. Zolotaryov, aged 38, was clad in Dubinina's fur coat and hat. Kolovatov wore additional layers likely taken from others. Such behavior, while grim, suggests a practical and logical will to survive. But the condition of their bodies made the mystery even darker. 3 of the 4 had suffered fatal injuries. Thibault-Brignol had a massive skull fracture, his head crushed by a force comparable to a car accident. Dubinina and Zolotaryov both had severe chest trauma, Dubinina with 10 fractured ribs, Zolotaryov with 5. The forensic specialist noted that such force could not be caused by a fall. It had to be intense, sudden, and without leaving external wounds. That's what made it so strange. None of these injuries left external marks. It was as if they'd been crushed by pressure, without breaking the skin. Kolovatov's cause of death was less clear. He had a broken nose, an open wound behind his ear, and a twisted neck. It's believed he died of hypothermia, possibly after sustaining trauma. Then came the most gruesome detail. All 4 bodies in the ravine had suffered facial soft tissue damage not present in the others. Dubinina was missing her tongue, her eyes, part of her lips, and a fragment of her skull. Zolotaryov's eyes were gone. Kolovatov had no eyebrows. These horrific injuries sparked lurid theories. Some suggested attack or torture. However, forensic pathologists provided a more rational explanation. The ravine was a part of a stream bed. During the months the bodies lay buried, water and animals likely caused facial tissue to decompose or be scavenged. In Dubinina's case, about 100 grams of coagulated blood were found in her stomach, indicating her heart may have still been beating when her tongue was removed, perhaps moments after death. Investigators ruled these injuries post-mortem, though that didn't stop the speculation. Zolotaryov was found with a camera around his neck, unlike those recovered from the tent, and a pen in one hand with a notepad in the other. The pad was blank, as if he had died just before writing something crucial. The 1959 criminal inquest reached no satisfying conclusion. Investigators first considered an attack by local Mansi tribespeople, perhaps angered by trespassing. But this theory quickly collapsed. Only the hiker's footprints were found, and there was no sign of struggle. The Mansi had also assisted in the search and had no known hostility toward hikers. Avalanche theory was floated next, but evidence contradicted it. We'll revisit that later. An animal attack was dismissed. No predator tracks were found, and the injuries didn't match claw or bite marks. In the end, Soviet authorities simply stated that no crime had been committed and closed the case. One of the doctors famously remarked that the force which killed Dubinina and Zolotaryov exceeded what any human could inflict. No person could possibly have caused such catastrophic damage. But then, another strange detail emerged, adding a Cold War twist to an already baffling case. When forensic analysts tested the hiker's clothing, they discovered unusual levels of radiation on certain garments. Dubinina's brown sweater and Krivonishenko's wool trousers, in particular, tested positive for radioactive contamination. This discovery didn't align with the context of a hiking trip, and it was only uncovered because one of the investigators happened to use a Geiger counter. The presence of radiation immediately fueled speculation. Had the Dyatlov group encountered some secret Soviet weapon or wandered into a zone contaminated by nuclear testing? Was there a cover-up? However, a more mundane explanation was also possible. Yuri Krivonishenko had previously worked at the Mayak nuclear facility and had assisted in the cleanup of the 1957 Kishtim disaster, one of the worst nuclear accidents in Soviet history. It's entirely plausible that his clothing had retained contamination from that time. Similarly, Alexander Kolevatov had studied nuclear physics and worked at a classified research institute in Moscow. Either of these connections might explain the radiation detected on certain items. In other words, the radioactive clothing may have had no connection to the hikers' deaths. It might have been a red herring. Still, this detail only deepened the public's suspicions. When the bodies were returned to the families, some relatives reported that the victims' skin appeared unnaturally tanned, and in some cases their hair had turned prematurely gray. Authorities dismissed the discoloration as a result of natural mummification due to weeks of sun exposure in sub-zero temperatures. Hair, they said, can change color during embalming or from environmental conditions. But to grieving parents in 1959, orange-tinted skin and gray hair, combined with radiation and secrecy, sounded less like science and more like science fiction. By May of that year, the official investigation was winding down, still without definitive answers. The lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, was under pressure to close the case. In his final report, he wrote that the hikers died due to the effects of an unknown compelling force. It was a vague, catch-all conclusion, a bureaucratic admission of defeat. No external culprit could be identified. There were no signs of foul play. And so, the case was quietly closed with no criminal charges. The files were stamped as classified and shelved deep in Soviet archives. The Dyatlov Pass region was declared off-limits to hikers for the next 3 years, allegedly to prevent further accidents, though some believe it was an effort to keep prying eyes away. The official explanation, a compelling natural force, raised more questions than it answered. Imagine the weight of that silence. 9 young lives lost, families left with only vague assurances and forbidden from asking further questions. In the Soviet Union of 1959, when the party or the KGB told you not to investigate further, you complied, out of fear. The parents buried their children without knowing why they had died, and the Dyatlov incident faded into legend, spoken of in whispers across the Urals, among mountaineers and locals, as a chilling Cold War enigma. As for Yuri Yudin, the lone survivor who had turned back early due to illness, he lived with a lifetime of guilt and unanswered questions. Until his death in 2013, Yudin insisted that his friends hadn't died from any natural cause. In interviews, he made it clear He believed something man-made had happened on that mountain. He even suggested in his final years that his comrades were forced out of the tent at gunpoint and murdered. He speculated that Dubonina's tongue had been removed by the perpetrators because she was the most outspoken of the group. These were serious accusations, never proven, and admitted by Yudin himself to be speculation rather than fact. He had no hard evidence, only gut feeling, born of a lifetime of doubt. But even unproven, Yudin's perspective illustrates how deeply the Dyatlov mystery can haunt those closest to it. And here we are, decades later, still piecing together the fragments. Each clue a shard of a puzzle that refuses to form a complete picture. I am a modern investigator, poring over half-century-old case files, cross-referencing archival data with newly unearthed theories. And as I trace each lead, I can almost feel the cold wind of Dead Mountain reaching through time. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of the most perplexing, unsolved mysteries of the modern era, because it stands at the crossroads of logic and the inexplicable. Over the years, countless theories have been proposed. Some are grounded in science. Others drift into the paranormal or conspiratorial. Let's examine these theories one by one, like diverging trails in a dark forest. We'll assess their merits and weaknesses, keeping in mind that any viable theory must account for all of the bizarre facts. The slashed tent, the underdressed bodies, the extreme injuries, the radiation, the strange lights in the sky, and the eerie government secrecy. The first and most widely accepted theory, at least by Russian authorities, is the avalanche. This explanation is straightforward. The group, asleep in their tent on the mountain slope, was caught off guard when a slab of snow above them fractured and slid down. The tent began to collapse under the weight of snow. Fearing a full avalanche, the hikers panicked. They grabbed a knife and slashed their way out of the tent because the entrance was blocked or buried, and fled into the night, barefoot or wearing only socks. This theory regained popularity after a renewed investigation in 2019-2020. Russian officials re-examined the case and concluded that a slab avalanche was the most likely cause of death. Later that year, a team of scientists published computer simulations that supported the plausibility of such an event. What makes the avalanche theory appealing is that it frames the hikers' actions not as irrational, but as sensible emergency responses. If you believe an avalanche is moments from crushing you, escaping the tent, immediately, by any means, is the right call. According to this theory, a slab of snow, possibly loosened by wind or heat from the group's stove, broke free and slammed into the tent. The hikers, experienced and calm under pressure, initiated a survival drill. They cut their way out, moved quickly downhill toward the forest, hoping to reach cover. In their rush, they left behind boots and cold-weather gear. Survival was measured in seconds. At the tree line, they regrouped. Some attempted to build a fire. Others dug a snow shelter. The ravine, where the last 4 bodies were found, showed signs of tree branches laid out, possibly the framework of a snow cave meant to preserve body heat. And yet, despite the avalanche theory's logic and growing support, it still struggles to fully explain every detail. The unusual injuries, the crushed ribs and shattered skulls without corresponding external trauma, the radiation, the missing tongue, and most of all, the atmosphere of fear that radiates from every frozen footprint, every abandoned boot, every slashed piece of canvas. The avalanche theory may be part of the answer, but is it the whole truth? That's a question still waiting in the snow.